The RFP. Request for proposal. Brands put them out for marketing agencies to respond to with strategy and ideas to see if they can win that brand's business. At Brand Revolt, we don't feel like waiting around to be asked for help. So we started making RFPs on behalf of real brands that definitely didn't ask us to. This is Unsolicited RFPs.
All right, we're back for another episode of Unsolicited RFPs. I think this is episode 3, if I remember correctly. And today, the brand we are creating an RFP and then responding to said RFP for is Traeger, the ones who make the grills and do a lot of grill-related thought leadership, I guess. Do you call it that? Thought leadership?
Grill-related thought leadership.
Not thought leadership. That's not the right word. Grill-related content. That's a better word. So we're going to get into that. And we can cut this if we want to, but before we get to Traeger, I just wanted to bring up: did you hear recently, Adam, that Jaguar is looking for a new agency after that controversial rebrand?
I can't say that it surprises me a ton. No, I saw the rebrand and was very, very surprised. And it's not even like there was political undertones to what they did. But it's not even that. It's the fact that they put all their eggs in a very narrow basket. Uh-huh. And I'm not sure that there's a large enough audience to justify an organization that needs to sell millions of vehicles to I guess, cater to such a narrow market. And that was my number one concern with what they did and the number one risk in what they did.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know the details. I just saw something about it quickly. Accenture Song was their agency that did that rebrand with them, and I don't know if they've explicitly stated it's because they weren't happy with how it was received. I don't know, but anyways, they're on the look.
Well,
so
and to be fair to their agency, I can't remember if it was the CMO or VP of marketing for Jaguar came out after and definitely took ownership of the direction that they went. And so I don't think that can be entirely put on the agency. But I will say, whenever you've got two parties involved, right? You've got the in-house person who's driving the train, and then you've got the agency partner. I can tell you who's going to fall on the sword every single time in that scenario. And at some point, if the person on the in-house side at Jaguar realizes they're in hot water or their hypothesis didn't work out, it's a whole heck of a lot easier to fire the agency than it is to say, hey, this was all on me.
Yes. So on that happy note, good luck to you, Jaguar. But Traeger, so we love them. They're a company based out of Utah, where we are based out of as well. And I'll be presenting kind of I want to give you time to talk about some ideas. So I'm going to do a very consolidated version. It wouldn't probably qualify as a true full-on RFP, but I think about two things if I'm Traeger that I'm trying to accomplish, and these are very high level, obviously. One is to differentiate and show the value of pellet grills specifically, because that's what I offer, and there's still people that will have propane and charcoal and things like that. And so helping put out content, information, advertising, whatever, communication that's like, this is why you want pellets, and Traeger's the best pellet grill. And then two, international presence. They're big enough as a brand to have that kind of reach, but grilling as a concept is more so an American thing than other countries outside the U.S. Not that it's completely foreign to them, but we grill more in the U.S. than they do outside. So expanding the culture, the food interest, things like that related to grilling, and then if I'm a vessel for that and culturally, and my brand's attached to that, I want to expand internationally. Yeah. Those are kind of the two main things on my mind that I'm trying to do if I'm Traeger.
Well, and I almost would like to even zoom out a little bit more, Camden, and give kind of a 30,000-foot view of why did I want to talk about Traeger even. Because, first of all, Jeremy Andrus is their CEO, and I heard him speak at the original Silicon Slopes Tech Summit that they did. It was several years ago. And he talked about how he approaches being a CEO. And I found his session to be really captivating and immediately became a fan. And what's interesting about Jeremy is he had been at, and I believe it was Skullcandy, the headphones company, before, And that company had gone nuclear and took off and became a massive organization. They had a successful exit from that company, and he ended up buying Traeger, which was a regional grill company, a smoker, right? And these pellet grills, it was such an old thing. Like, people have been smoking meat now since basically since fire was invented, and so this is one of the oldest technologies, I would say, that's out there. And he came in and he layered on technology to such an old concept. And that in and of itself, to me, was already brilliant because it revitalized an industry that was somewhat analog and gave it a very technological upgrade. And over the last several years, I've watched since Jeremy purchased the company, it continued to grow, it continued to evolve, and I really feel like Traeger has done an excellent job. And so I think the one thing that I want to start with is, this isn't one of those companies that you're coming into from a marketing perspective and saying, okay, we need to blow up everything and start from scratch. Like, there is so much going right with Traeger. And so that's the first thing. And then you go to the philosophy we've had as an organization and how we really believe that it's really important to build a community first and build a relationship with your customer first before you try to monetize that relationship with the customer. And one of the things that Traeger has done that's so interesting is when they layered on this technology onto the pellet grills, they also launched an app. And this app, for those that use Traeger, is extremely valuable. It's got recipes in it. You can actually watch videos of people cooking the things that you're trying to cook. I use the timer on mine, and it's interconnected with my grill, so I can see what the temperature is on my grill at any time. If my grill's plugged in, I can actually turn it on. If I'm doing a brisket, which briskets take hours, right? I can leave the house instead of having to be there working on the brisket. And so I guess the thing that I want to convey here is, I actually believe that Traeger has done an excellent job of building a community. But I think Traeger has an issue that I think a lot of organizations have right now. And I heard a joke fairly recently, and I've actually since then seen it pop up on TikTok and Instagram many times that says, at 30, men have a very important decision to make. Are they going to get super into golf, or are they going to get obsessed with smoking meat? And those are the two options. There's no in between, right? And I've seen that several times. And I think it's actually, for all the satire with it, it's really true that right now, Traeger has an audience of, yes, it probably starts around 30, and then it skews a lot older. And one of the things that Traeger is going to have to do that a lot of other organizations also have to do is, if you start an audience at 30 and then that audience continues to get older, if you're not continuously backfilling the audience at 30, that conveyor belt eventually is going to end. And I think there's a lot of companies, and I would say Traeger was probably headed this way before Jeremy bought it, a lot of companies whose audiences are not figuratively dying. Their audiences are literally dying because they're aging out. And so one of the challenges I see for Traeger that I think is going to be really important over the next 10 to 15 years is making sure that they continue to backfill that conveyor belt of customers. And maybe that starts at 30, or maybe we can even inch that earlier in a consumer's lifetime. And so that's really, as I was thinking about how to respond to an RFP for Traeger, if we were to take our marketing philosophy and demonstrate how to add value to what they're currently doing, I really wanted to narrow in on this idea of making sure that that conveyor belt of customers is always full, and that we're not leaving a gap by the people that started with Traeger 10 years ago are now 40 and 50 years old, and there's nobody to replace them. So I'd love to get kind of your reaction to that before I go into ideas and recommendations.
Yeah, that all makes sense. I think so. I'm trying to remember all the different points you just said, but the filling of the funnel makes sense. It also makes you think about with the nature. Well, they have little add-ons you can buy, like spices and things like that attached to it. But as far as their main flagship thing, the grill, you're not buying a lot of them. You're not buying them regularly. And so, how do you also, if you do get someone to finally buy your grill, do they think about you again other than when they're grilling? Do they have connection to other side products? Are they part of an active community in which they're helping be word of mouth? Which I think that is the community you're referring to. I think they have a pretty good strong word of mouth. People sharing with one another, literally standing around the grill. Oh, I should get one of these. Like I think that works pretty well. But knowing that you're not going to sell to any one individual a bunch of grills, probably, what does that model look like as well? And so. Yeah,
Well, I want to add to what you just said because I think you're spot on. I would hypothesize that people buy a car more often than they replace their grill. I mean, the grill is something that once you buy it, you really don't replace it until it breaks, and then you have to replace it. And so I do think it's really critical for Traeger and other companies like it to maximize the accessory sales to their community. Or you're right. I mean, if it's one purchase every 7 years, let's say, which I would imagine the data is probably a little bit less. I bet it's probably closer to 4 to 5 years, especially if people don't do a good job of cleaning their Traeger, which I've found with my Traeger. I definitely need to do a better job. I thought mine was broken, the first one I ever had, and really I just needed to do a better job of cleaning it. So now with this new one that I have, I've done a much better job of cleaning it. But I think it's probably 4 to 5 years is what I would imagine the data is going to say, because I bet a lot of people move and don't bring their Traeger with them or something like that. There's a lot of different factors that go into that. But I think you cannot continuously monetize the audience unless you have a relationship with them, because otherwise Kinder's is, for example, are you familiar with Kinder's? It's a company that makes... What's that?
Like the Kinder Bueno? Oh.
No, so Kinder is a company that makes rubs for meat. So
yeah. Okay, I know them.
They're in Costco. They're in all
yes.
the and actually I think their lemon butter garlic on a tri-tip might be the best rub that's out there. No offense to Traeger, who I'm sure has a great one too. But if you want people to purchase your accessories, you have to have a relationship with them, because otherwise the Kinders of the world are going to actually get that purchase. So I think you're spot on with what you're saying about it's not just about the grill. It's about making sure that they buy the additional products as time goes on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So let me try to put that into add to what I said. I talked about kind of expanding the preference for pellet over other forms of grill, international. I think you just kind of brought up also making sure you're getting a younger audience, and so that they don't age out you're not losing them. And what else would you put in there as like a?
I just think a way to stay more top of mind, because grilling and smoking meat is something that Traeger is going to need to insert themselves into the actual thought process around smoking meat. I don't think I need a Traeger steak when I'm trying to plan what I'm going to smoke on Sunday. I'm thinking I need a tri-tip, right? And so how can Traeger continue to expand the relationship with the consumer so much that you're not just smoking a tri-tip, but you're smoking the Traeger recipe of the tri-tip. You're using the Traeger rub. You're using Traeger pellets, because that's how you get the very best meal that you can have. I think that's where there's some room for expansion of that relationship, that you're not just a smoker, but you're involved in every component of the smoking. And using the app to cook my meat, which I absolutely do, has been a great way for Traeger to do that. I just think it can be really scaled.
Cool. Okay, I agree.
Yeah.
There's the outline, the objective.
Okay.
Do you got something for how to do that?
I do. And I've been, ever since we started talking about this, I've just been kind of giddy about this idea that we've come up with. And I foreshadowed it a little bit. So I'm going to go back to the joke that I referenced, where it's at 30, men can do one of two things. For me, it was both. I got obsessed with golf and smoking meat. But the golf audience and the Traeger audience have a lot of intersection. So I actually wanted to I wanted to share first. I first ran, and of course I'm using AI for some of this, but I wanted to understand the profile of an average Traeger customer, right? And so Traeger might have to tell us whether or not this is accurate, but it resonates for me. So you're looking at an age of somewhere between 30 and 50. Gender is primarily male, but growing female interest. Household income is going to be somewhere between 90 and 200K plus. Location is suburban and exurban U.S. markets, particularly in the West, Midwest, and South, and I think that checks out. It's a lot harder to have a smoker when you have an apartment building and everybody's stacked on top of each other. So to me, that checks out. Education, college educated, and then family, married or in a long-term partnership, typically has children at home. And the reason that checks out for me is the trouble that you go through to smoke meat. There's very few people that are willing to do it for one or even just for two. You kind of need to be smoking for the whole family. And then we get into psychographics. They view grilling and smoking as a passion or point of pride, not just a way to cook. And totally, every time I smoke meat, if there's leftover, I go and I share it. I take it to my brother's house or I share with the neighbors. And part of it is, yes, I want them to know how excellent I am at smoking meat, right? Like it just kind of is what it is. It's the same thing as when you hit a hole in one in golf, you tell everybody about it, right? You enjoy being the go-to host for friends and family events. You see outdoor cooking as an experience to be crafted and shared. You want to impress others with your cooking skills and gear knowledge. I touched on that. You crave community and connection, and grilling's a social sport, which I think is, I thought that was a good line from ChatGPT here, that grilling is a social sport, because I totally agree with that.
You can't smoke meat and not talk about, like you said, you can't smoke a brisket and not tell somebody how it turned, good or bad. You gotta tell somebody about it.
Yeah, smoking meat is like CrossFit, right? Like you just got to talk about it. So then it enjoys learning new skills, experimenting with food, and so on and so forth. But then I asked it to run, okay, how does the Traeger audience intersect with the golf audience? And it's pretty cool because ChatGPT actually gave me a chart that demonstrates the overlap between the golf audience and the Traeger audience. So the age is 30 to 50 years old for the Traeger audience, and then golf enthusiasts is 30 to 60. Gender, 80% male, golf enthusiasts, 75% male. Income, 90 to 200K, golf enthusiasts, 100K average household income for golf fans. And for those that are wondering where that number comes from, that's actually coming specifically from PGA Tour data. Location is suburban and exurban, and same thing with golf enthusiasts. And lifestyle, family-focused homeowner, and golf enthusiast, family-focused homeowner, club owner, or club member, or aspirational. And so there's tons of overlap. So that's how I'll foreshadow this. Is I actually believe that golf as a category has a ton of intersection with meat smokers. On top of that, golf in the last 5 years has very, very successfully rebuilt the conveyor belt of customers. And honestly, COVID may be the best thing that ever happened to golf as a sport and the worst thing that ever happened to golfers because you used to be able to just go up and get out, get a tee time and go play pretty quickly. And now you have to schedule in St. George, you have to schedule at least a week out if you want to get a tee time. St. George, Utah. So golf successfully achieved what I believe Traeger is going to need to achieve over the next 5 to 10 years. And because of that demographic overlap, I think that's a demonstration that following the golf model could be very valuable to Traeger. And so all that to say, there is a golfer on the PGA Tour who is one of the most electric personalities that golf has ever seen. And I actually watched the Netflix special. They had I can't remember, I think it was season 3 of Full Swing, which is a Netflix docu-series that follows these professional golfers on tour. and one of their episodes was entirely about this golfer. And this golfer has one of the largest social followings. And really, the thing that they outlined in the episode of Netflix is that this guy came up in an age of social media that was different than what his predecessors had come up with. And he's the first person who, prior to, maybe not the first person, but one of the first, that prior to becoming a phenom on the tour, already had an audience because of the content he had created beforehand. So he's a content creator that made it to the tour, and his name's Minwoo Lee, and he actually has a sister who is probably, if you compare the rankings of where she's at on the LPGA compared to where he's at on the PGA, she is far and away better than he is. And he's coming up, and I think he's closing that gap a little bit. But between his role as a content creator and then, of course, his sister's rise to fame, he's really built a massive following. But the thing that's so fun about him is there was a meme that came out several years ago, and those that get on TikTok and Instagram Reels and stuff like that will have heard this. But there's this meme where this guy just started yelling, "Let him cook," And now they put it over, like when somebody gets on fire in the NBA, they'll use that meme. That audio gets put on top of basically whenever somebody's doing an amazing job. Well, this guy has made his tagline. Minwoo Lee has made his tagline, "Let him cook." And every time he hits a good shot, he'll upload his video and he'll upload that audio with it, showing this incredible shot that he hit on the golf course. And it's got that "Let him cook" tagline with it. And it's gotten to the point where his followers will show up to PGA events, and we'll make sure that in post-production here we show some of these images because they're crazy. But his followers will show up with chef hats on. And the chef hats will say "Let him cook." They'll wear T-shirts that say "Let him cook." And it's all because that's kind of the tagline that's associated with him. So as I was thinking about this intersection of golf and smoking meat, it's so funny to hear those words come out of my mouth because it's just such an odd thing to talk about, the intersection between golf and smoking meat. But there really is an intersection there. And then on top of that, to have this guy whose tagline is "Let him cook," whose fans are so rabid that they will show up in chef hats to PGA events to cheer him on. And then on top of that, he's built this massive following of a younger generation of golfers that is not the same people who are following Rory McIlroy. It's not the same people who are following, even Scotty Scheffler, who's one of the younger stars on the PGA Tour. But there's a different audience that follows him because Minwoo Lee is a content creator. And that's what a lot of these younger followers kind of aspire to be, is a content creator, maybe even more than to be a professional athlete. And so the audience that he caters to is different. And I actually think that it's an audience that is going to hit that 30 mark, and then they'll have the choice to make, right? Do they get super good at smoking meats, or do they focus on golf as their lifelong obsession, right? And so because of that overlap and his tagline being "Let him cook," there's just such an obvious potential partnership here, right? Where if Traeger was to partner with the golfer whose tagline is "Let him cook," he's got a massive audience of the people Traeger needs to connect with in order to continue to have that conveyor belt of consumers continue. It's kind of a match made in heaven. So I guess step one, before I get into the different tactics that might come along with it, the different possible content that they can create together, is I believe that Traeger Grills needs to enter into an official sponsorship and content creation partnership with Minwoo Lee, because there is so much opportunity for collaboration and to achieve their joint and collective goals together. So we'll start there. What do you think?
That, and we didn't even talk about with the name like Minwoo Lee. He's foreign to the U.S., right? So that kind of
he's from Australia.
Australia. So the international box there. Not that it's just 1-to-1. Everyone will love him because he's not from the U.S., but to have a connection outside the U.S. that also kind of the extension of grilling internationally. Okay. So I want to go into thinking about like the chef hats, for example, it's not a uniform per se, but in golf you don't have like jerseys, you don't have like numbers on your back, like others. You can't buy someone's jersey in the shop, so to speak, and that's like almost like he's in a sport that doesn't have jerseys or uniforms. He's kind of got one that everyone else is showing up. You don't really know who they're a fan of necessarily, but you can see his fans just by looking at them in the crowd.
He's
That's
cracked the
interesting.
merch code in golf,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you talked about how he was a content creator before, before he got to the become where he's at in the golfing world. Do you feel like, and I know you're more into golf than I am, so I don't know much about how well he's actually doing. How good is he in the tour? Like, is he like is his performance affect if he doesn't get to the top, if he's just kind of middle of the road or bottom of the pack, is there any waning of his following, or is that, speak to that if you would, because I just don't know how well he's doing on the golf world.
No, and I think it's a really smart and good question. There's two things that I think really protect him. Number one is when you look at it from a timing perspective, he is so early in his career, and he just achieved his first 2 tour wins, which I think there's 50 tour events a year, and I could totally be wrong on that, but it's somewhere around 50 events a year. Some weeks there's 2 events going on, some weeks there's nothing going on. And he won 2 events over the course of the last year. So he's definitely on the upswing, right? He's gaining momentum. But number 2 is the fact that he has this community around his content insulates him from decline, meaning it would take longer for him to fall from relevance than some of these other players who their only exposure to the audience is their appearance on TV on the tour. But because he has a direct relationship with his audience, which P.S., that's what I think Traeger needs to continue to build, that direct relationship with his audience insulates him from falling off.
Gotcha. Okay. You don't have to get into all the specifics because you wouldn't even be able to do that now. But from a high level, like when you say like kind of like partner make content together, what kind of content, what does that look like? Give me a picture of what that might look like partnering with him on a content perspective.
Yeah, so to start with, there is an unlimited amount of content that you could create. So I just want to start there, and by no means am I speaking as if this is the end of the road. I think this is the beginning of a brainstorm that could lead to something really, really special, okay? But a few of the ideas, number one is I thought a cooking show would be really fun that we could film with him in the off season. And if you think about it, you could film it like, let's say 6 episodes over the course of 2 weeks and then be out of his hair during the time that he's training for the season, right?
Let him cook.
Let him cook. There you go. That's the name of the show, right? With Traeger Grills and Minwoo Lee. And I think that would be an incredible concept. The other thing is, and of course I built, and for those that are listening, I built an AI agent on ChatGPT that took all my content that I've developed over the course of the last 5 or 6 years, including my podcast, my book, my keynote presentations, and all that kind of stuff. And I've leveraged that agent now because it's totally up to speed on my marketing philosophy. And so what I'll do lots of times is when I'm workshopping an idea, I'll actually plug it into this AI agent, and it will basically go through the thought process that I go through, and then present ideas and really speed up my timeline to get to some of those things. So a couple of ideas that my agent that I built has spit out is, number one, the on-tour Traeger life. So post-round, backyard-style meals cooked with teammates, family, and friends. So basically, everybody saw what happened on the course, but kind of the download, like after you have a big sales meeting or something like that, usually the team will get together and be like, okay, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? And to have Minwoo Lee there with some of his most trusted people in his inner circle eating whatever was just smoked on the Traeger while they sit and talk about his round and what went right and what went wrong. Of course, there's a level of invasiveness on the tour that you want to make sure that you don't get. So it's not like we want him to have this massive time obligation after every round, but maybe at the end of the final night of maybe 5 or 6 tournaments a year, you could go film some of that content, and he could be eating some of and the group that's talking could be eating the food that was cooked on the Traeger, and that's where Traeger can really kind of showcase what they can do without making it a Traeger ad, like an overt, hey, buy from Traeger today. No, Traeger is providing the food that's leading to this conversation. And then, of course, I think it would be hilarious to have Min-Woo Lee sharing recipes, his favorite Traeger recipes, and of course, Traeger could help him kind of come up with some of that stuff. But I for some reason, just the idea of Min-Woo Lee sharing his favorite recipes, and then people could watch him smoke the meals, and he could release it to his audience, Traeger could release it to their audience, and so on. I think that could be really fun. And then if you think about it, the place where it could get really interesting is if Min-Woo Lee could invite other tour professionals to come smoke some meat with him and have a conversation about their careers, about their lives, about their aspirations. And these are basically giving the audience the opportunity to get to know these professional golfers. And again, Traeger is providing, I mean, we talk about breaking bread, right? Like having a meal with someone is a pretty intimate experience. I can tell you there's a lot of people I wouldn't go to lunch with, and it's like because you're a captive audience, right? And so Traeger actually providing the platform for people to break bread together and to have some more in-depth relationship building conversations. Traeger as the facilitator is a great position for them to have in some of these conversations. And then of course, I would want Traeger to be on the bag. Like I would want when Min-Woo Lee is hitting these amazing shots on TV or on tour or even on the social media videos that he shares, I would want Traeger to be front and center there. I want people to know, because of his Let Him Cook moniker that he's built, I want people to know that Traeger is how he cooks, right? Mm-hmm. And we would want to build an endless amount of content that demonstrates that Traeger is how Min-Woo Lee cooks. And then, I almost don't want to go too deep into it because the spider web of content is endless, and I don't want to just waste all this time with the specific content ideas because it's really the concept, and then it would need to be a joint brainstorm. And the place where this would be successful is a joint brainstorm between Traeger, Min-Woo Lee, and anybody else that's involved in the creation and distribution. But this idea of letting the fans cook, where fans can submit their favorite smoked meat recipes to win a chance to come smoke that recipe with Min-Woo Lee and spend the day with Min-Woo Lee in the off season or something, could be really fun. And then you get the fans involved in amplifying the message. And then of course, Traeger already has distribution built in, right? So every piece of content that's filmed could be distributed on Traeger's app. And then, of course, it could also be distributed to Min-Woo Lee's massive audience that he has. And the things that start to get a lot of engagement, you could then use paid media as an amplifier to amplify reach if some of that content really takes off. And then, of course, I think there's earned opportunities because it's such a unique partnership. It's not like there's a bunch of grills sponsoring the PGA Tour, so it's a novel concept. I mean, what if Traeger had a presence at the PGA Tour events that Min-Woo Lee was at, and they were smoking his favorite 5 meats there at the event, and people could come eat, and there again, just an endless amount of activations and content that could come from this. So before we get too far into like the spider web of content distribution and strategy, I'm curious what your reaction is to that.
It makes me think also, I'll respond more professionally, but as a tangent, Happy Gilmore 2 is coming out. And like, not that he's the same character or persona as Happy Gilmore, but his being kind of fun and the chef hat and the content bucks kind of the traditional uptight how golf might have been in the past. It's a little bit more fun, playful, and we've talked before about like golf content, like good golf and things like that. And how just the timing of Happy Gilmore 2 coming out. Like Happy Gilmore, if he was a real golfer, would be a Traeger. Like he would cook on a Traeger.
Oh,
like,
you mean John Daly?
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah. So it just thinks about it. It's kind of capitalizing on where, not that we're trying to like tear down and make it a joke or anything, but kind of where golf culture is going. Like he said, he's on the leading edge of that in a way. A new kind of golfer is emerging, and something like having, instead of having, just cocktails in the club after the game, to grill on a Traeger around, a fire or something like that. Like that's a different type of experience that you can reach the younger audience with.
You're absolutely right. I mean, 5 years ago, golf was a rich man's sport, right? Like rich people golfed. That was the kind of stereotype that went on there. And it's like, oh, I don't golf. I have a job, right? Like there was a lot of that. And the barrier to golf seems to have been knocked down. There's so many more personas, I guess, or groups of people that golf that didn't 5 years ago. And I really believe that smoking meat is a very similar thing, right? It's a rich man's game today. And I think with a partnership like this and capitalizing on the way Min Woo Lee has really contributed to the change in removing the barriers to golf, I think the same thing could happen for smoking meat and for pellet grills. And so I really do kind of feel like it's a match made in heaven.
Yeah. Okay, so then I have two more reactions. One is kind of why I think it's good, and one's kind of a challenge or a question to help me visualize it better. One reason I think that's also interesting is, as this person that you talked about is not Minwoo is not only a face that could help be attached to the brand. Influencers is not a new thing, but he's already a content creator. So it's not just, hey, let's get this guy to show up for some of our programming as Traeger, but depending on how the conversation goes, and again, we're not going to get into specifics right now, it's he might be having his own series, his own thing he wants to do, and we can help be in the background or be the one who fuels the food for that, or something where he's going to continue to create content himself without Traeger, and we can insert ourselves into him. It's like a reverse influencer. We're not just trying to hire him for our stuff, but we can help fuel his stuff. That's even more interesting to me than just let's get a celebrity face to be attached to the brand and they're only ever in our produced stuff. He's got his own stuff.
Exactly. And I think that's part of why we chose him, right? Is he really has built-in distribution as well. And I talked about the cross-section of the two general audiences. Well, Traeger has a specific audience. Min Woo Lee has a specific audience. And this only works if both of them distribute to each other's platforms. I mean, I see Min Woo Lee's audience growing massively as a result of this as well. It's kind of mutually assured benefit.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm there on that one. So now I'm thinking about, if I'm Traeger, I'm looking at what I currently am kind of doing similar, which nothing's that similar. We don't have golf in the partnership, but Traeger does have I'm on their YouTube, and they have other social media as well. I don't know if these are connected to the app, if you're watching YouTube through the app, or if they're uploaded natively. Maybe some of the views are from there, but they've got a lot of views. They have 230,000 subscribers on YouTube, and a lot of recipes mostly. Some of it's kind of how to, introducing some of the new versions of their grills, how to clean them, etc. But like lately, it's been like, here's how to make some ribs, some chicken lollipops, some etc. And they're getting thousands of. 7 days ago, his most recent one, 12,000 views. So it's doing pretty good, and it's got I don't know the exact breakdown of who's watching this. If they're, I'm assuming it's mostly people who have a Traeger already and are trying to then know how to optimize their usage of it, I guess. So now maybe I'm answering the question. My question was, why would I need something like this? Maybe my own suggestion to the answer is like, this kind of content you're talking about is reaching people who don't already own a Traeger.
So they do an incredible job of engaging people who have entered their community. And to be honest with you, no notes, check the box. I'm not going to come in and say I need Traeger to change the way they're engaging with their community. I think they do an amazing job. This is a community expansion and acquisition initiative that I'm recommending here. My hypothesis is if we can get more people engaged with Traeger's content, and you don't get there by just continuing to pump out your normal cooking content and how-tos and DIYs and all that kind of stuff, but instead leveraging another platform like Min Woo Lee's platform or golf as a platform, and inserting yourself into a conversation that you currently don't have access to. And then if we get that many people to engage with your content, how many more grills are we going to sell? How many more accessories are we going to sell? And how many more people are we going to remove that barrier to entry that golf removed 5 years ago and allow more people to get into this concept of using pellet grills and smoking meat?
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm just a data point of one, but I've never seen anything pop up organically related to Traeger myself. It's all they're getting lots of views, but again, I'm just what I'm saying is that I'm that helps me even more think about this is probably people who are just in the system because they have a grill, and so these subscribers are like, yeah, give me my weekly recipe or whatever as an idea, but like, yeah, there's not content floating around that is, you might not have heard of us at all, or you might have heard of us but you never considered using us yet, and it's providing some kind of entertainment or value outside of how to use our product if you already have it.
Yeah, let me speak to that, Camden, because I actually think you're illustrating an issue that is very consistent across a lot of brands. It's not unique to Traeger. But there's only so many keywords that you can buy. There's only so many Google searches. And P.S., that volume's going down now as a result of AI, right? And so because there's only so much current demand that you can capture, if your strategy is all related to capturing existing demand, the only way to expand your total addressable market is to expand the demand. And the only way to expand the demand is first to start with awareness and make people aware of your product or company, and then engage those people through until purchase. And I think one of the mistakes that a lot of these large scale brands who have achieved success, and I would put Traeger in that category, they've achieved success, they now are going to have to do something significant to expand the total addressable market, because there's not, or they've essentially reached the maximum current demand, and without influencing or creating more, they're going to stagnate. And I really believe that this method of using collaboration of audiences and things like that to create content is one of the very best paths to create new demand when you've reached your cap on how you can capture the current existing demand.
So the nature of unsolicited RFPs is to one side kind of presents the idea, the other one kind of challenges and pokes and tries to figure it out. I'm trying to think of more ways to poke holes, and I can bring up some of the thoughts I've had.
I wish every sales pitch was to you, Camden.
Yeah,
I honestly do.
I do. Well, I have some thoughts, but I feel like, and maybe I'm just trying. I need to just cancel out my agency mind. But like, I feel like I can answer them. What you've done here that I think answers a lot of the concerns I might have is this value of ongoing organic attention. I shouldn't say organic, like it's not paid for, but it's not just placing of your brand in a paid media environment, or because I'm thinking, okay, well, why is this worth? I could, if I want to go after golfers, I could sponsor things related to golf. I could show up at the PGA. I could spend money to be involved in those. I could buy ad time on the the Masters and things like that. And so like, I'm trying, the hole I was trying to poke in is like, why do I need this guy who's maybe not going to end up being that great of a golfer? He's obviously pretty good, but like, to be determined. Or risk, the brand. What if he goes off the rails or something? But my answer to my own question is like, but again, paid media is you've got the attention and it's gone, and you have to keep paying to show up, and it's not necessarily giving a reason other than just brand awareness for golfers. So that I'm answering my question, the ongoing attention where you're providing branded entertainment in a way that's attached to your brand clearly is more valuable than just plugging your brand into the environment with like the logo showing up.
Well, and I know, Camden, you personally don't watch the PGA Tour very often, and so, but if I was to ask you, even after a weekend of watching the PGA Tour, if I was going to ask you which financial institution or investment organization bought a 30-second spot on Saturday evening, or, well, they usually play during the day, so let's say Saturday morning, for one, there would be 17 to choose from because all you see is financial institution and life insurance on these golf
and
ads.
some beer brands.
And some beer brands, right? And a few other things. But in addition to that, people check out during the commercials in a way that they don't when you create content that's engaging and actually connects with that audience through creativity. And it just buying a sponsorship and buying media the way it's always been bought, we've already hit the diminishing returns on that. There's actually more impressions today in paid media for sale than humanity has the ability to consume. Like everybody would have to watch or see like 50 impressions a day in order to consume all the available ads for sale. So I think bots are seeing a lot of the ads anyway in a lot of these cases. And so now more than ever, just paid media as a vehicle to connect with your audience isn't going to work. You have to create something that's so valuable that they actually want to watch it. They're going to seek it out. And you just don't have the ability to do that with a traditional media buy. But when you're collaborating with somebody who's already demonstrated an ability to connect with their audience, like Minwoo Lee, you're going to break through. And not only that, but you can use that owned content to power your earned media efforts, your social media. Now you've got an unlimited amount of content you can post on your social media pages. And then, of course, you can use what works through those other channels to understand where to invest your paid media dollars because you know what people are engaging with.
How do I make sure if I do this that I'm not getting too let's say it goes super well and it's like it's working exactly like you're describing. I don't want to be too attached to one to the golf scene necessarily or golfers or the personality or vibe of this golfer and his like what if I get too attached to that it takes my he becomes the face of my brand when I don't want it to be too stuck to him. How do I avoid that from happening?
Well, okay. The way I would answer that is that I agree 100%. And I think this partnership with Minwoo Lee should be one of 10 that Traeger is cultivating and working with. And they should find the other audiences that intersect with smoking meat. And they should find a content creator to partner with in every single category. And the money we would have put towards a media buy, instead we're going to use to fund content that's going to be evergreen and lasting. And just like, when you have a series on TV, Lost is a great example. After season 4, it was kind of like, all right, everybody knows this thing is winding down. Like we're not going to get much farther here with this idea. Prison Break is another good example of that. And you can only break out of so many prisons before it ends, right? And so I would say that I would start with maybe a 3-year deal with Minwoo Lee. And then we renew if the audience is still engaged and we're still seeing success. And if we start seeing diminishing returns, we're going to take that money that we invested with Minwoo Lee. We're still going to own that content. We're still going to use that content. But now we're going to move that budget into other content that we'll create with another creator. Or if marketing trends shift, maybe the strategy is completely different. But the way I would look at it for now is you are building relationships with people who can give you access to an audience you don't currently have, and you're doing it through content instead of paid media.
Okay. I have one last question about that. Do you have, before I get to that, do you have other concepts that you want to talk through about how to address their marketing needs, or is that the main?
No, I think it's a great starting point, and we can give them the whole plan if they want to call us and walk through it. But I would say for now we've given a pretty good illustration of what this is, why it should happen, and what it would look like.
Okay. So one more thought, and I think it's not like a deal breaker thing. I think you'll probably have I can probably guess what your answer might be, but you talked about how the value of this and I'm kind of also talking about past episodes, not just this one, but you've talked about the value of having this community building owned audience, etc., where you don't have to keep paying the gatekeeper, so to speak, to get to someone's attention through paid media. But at the same time, what you're describing now is not cheap, because one, for his to buy his representation or whatever in the brand deal, whatever you want to call it. He's not gonna do it for super cheap, and then to produce things, to promote those, I gotta get the stuff out there. Like, is it still worth? It's gonna be cost me a lot of money as Traeger, whereas I can keep doing these recipes, or I can do other stuff that maybe isn't as like boom on the scene, but I can put more, more things out into the public as a chance of having people bite attention wise on that stuff. This kind of could be a lot of eggs in one basket to me, maybe.
Yeah. I see consumers in cohorts, right? And so when the media landscape is a certain way and you have a brilliant marketing strategy that generates a cohort or a generation of buyers, that's excellent. The problem is that cohort will continue to move through your buying cycle and ultimately age out, like we've talked about before. And the strategy that generated that cohort of buyers is not the strategy that's going to generate the next cohort of buyers. And so think about your audience or your consumers in generations, and how do you make sure that you're constantly finding a new cohort and using the correct media strategy to connect with them. I can assure you that what we're recommending today with Min Woo Lee's audience and the cohort associated with his audience in 10 years would not work to reach the 17 to 24-year-olds that we would be targeting then. And so if somebody has found a marketing strategy that with a specific cohort worked really, really well, I would say continue to nurture that cohort throughout their lifetime with you. But you also have to be developing these new cohorts or you're going to have major problems down the road. So the whole point of what I'm saying there is the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results. If Traeger is seeing consistent new adoption with a younger audience, this probably doesn't make a ton of sense from an investment perspective. But my hypothesis, and I'm pretty confident in this hypothesis, is that they are looking for a way to engage the next cohort. And in order to do that, you have to invest a fair amount of money, just like they did with the previous cohort. So it's also why I'm not recommending it for my neighbor Steve, who invented a grill in his backyard, right? Like, Traeger has achieved a level of greatness that gives them the ability to try new things. And I would say one of the biggest problems I see with brands is they get so big and established that they don't realize that their success is sowing the seeds of their demise. And you have to continue to innovate, even though the incentives when you're in front, the incentives are not to innovate. The incentives are to continue with what's working. But that's when you've got to try something different so that you can continue to build the moat around your organization and defend yourself from the competition.
Cool. Yeah, it's a good point, though. This isn't someone who's trying to... They're like number 6 on the list of like well-known or popular or high quality, and they're trying to like leapfrog, because then it's like you don't almost justify the relationship. But Traeger, is one where you're worthy to kind of come to the table with a PGA pro and have that kind of relationship. Okay, good. As usual, I'm sold. So so if you were talking to Jeremy, Andres, or anybody at Traeger, or anybody who maybe is hearing this that's not Traeger but is interested in similar concepts or buys in, what would kind of your message be to them? What should they, if Jeremy or someone listening to this, what do you want them to do next?
Well, next step is let's talk, right? Like, first of all, we need to validate our hypotheses. We did this without getting a peek behind the curtain. We don't know the intricacies. I do know, I've got to imagine that right now Traeger's dealing with some serious issues with tariffs and things like that, although it sounds like over the weekend some of that stuff got at least temporarily figured out. And so, of course, we may be a little bit ignorant in some of these ideas. So step one would be let's make sure that our hypothesis is correct and that the assumptions that we're making that led to this reflect what's actually going on in your business. And if they match, let's give Min Woo Lee a call. Let's let him cook, and my team can definitely find out a way to do that and bring this thing to life. But yeah, I would say the next step is just a conversation. More importantly, this show is not designed. I mean, sure, yeah, if Jeremy called me and said, hey, let's get something going, sweet, yeah, let's do it. We're excited. But this is more designed so that people can see how we think. And if your organization would be interested in strategies that aren't just the same old paid media centric strategy that organizations have been using for the last 20 years, and you want to do something a little bit different and you want to take a risk, I think we'd be an excellent partner for you. So let us know. My email's adam@thebrandrevolt.com. And if anybody wants to talk more about how we could help their business, and it's crazy because I've gotten a lot of LinkedIn outreach already from some of our previous episodes, which has been really fun. I'm excited to continue some of those conversations and would love to talk to anybody that's interested.
Yeah, and we also not only release this full episode, but we like to clip these up into smaller portions. Anything that resonates with you, that maybe it's not just you and your brand, but if you know someone, hey, so-and-so that I know that has a company that could do something like that or would benefit from kind of the brand Revolt philosophy or whatever, please share our stuff. We're not just doing it to try to stroke our ego and get followers and stuff, but we really think we have some things to, some ideas and some approaches that can really help brands find perpetual marketing success and not have to be revisiting what they're doing every time an algorithm changes or a competitor has a bigger budget than them and things like that. So yeah, that's my little plug. Share this with someone else. I think it's been a real crime also that we have not been sharing meat as we've been talking about this around a Traeger. So oversight on our part, but
let me tell you, right before we recorded this, I had some tri-tip and eggs from that I made on the Traeger on Sunday. So I may not have eaten it during, which would have been maybe gross, especially with stuff in my teeth and everything during the conversation. But I do want you to know I had my tri-tip with eggs for lunch, and it was glorious.
Well, thanks for rubbing that in. I did not have that. I had a breakfast burrito. That's what I've had today so far. So not cooked on the grill. Anyways, but yeah, this has been another episode of Unsolicited RFPs. If you also have suggestions about a brand that you want us to talk about or that who needs some new ideas, shoot us a message. You can reach, like Adam said, individually, his email, or mine's camden@thebrandrevolt.com. I think we also have our podcast, general podcast email, which is podcast@thebrandrevolt.com, or comment on our LinkedIn post, whatever. But we want your ideas, and if there's something that would be a certain brand or product that would be of particular interest to you, we'd love to focus some of that content on that. So anything to add, Adam, before we sign off for the episode?
No, this was fun. Thanks, Camden.
Okay, see you next time. Thanks.